To put this revolution into an aesthetic context, Joyce is making a case against naturalism, that voice promoted by Zola in such works as Le Roman Expérimental in 1880, and taken up by such writers as Édouard Dujardin, whom some credit as Joyce's model for the interior monologue. A key tenet of naturalism derives from another of Aristotle's commonplaces, verisimilitude. Verisimilitude means sticking as close as possible to reality. That's why the interior monologue is effective artistically. It imitates the way we think. And that's basically what art is, said Aristotle, imitation, or mimesis in Greek. A portrait or a statue imitates its subject, a play imitates situations, actors imitate people, and a novel tries to bring an artist's world, imaginatively created, to life. Joyce accomplishes his verisimilitude by first passing his images through the filter of his memory. Much of Joyce's narrative comes directly from his own recollections and from such material as Dublin newspapers printed on or around Bloomsday, which he had with him in Trieste as he composed. That way, nearly every event, every snippet of conversation, every particular fact described in his fiction has already passed the test of realistic. Joyce puts a similar theory in Stephen's mouth in Scylla and Charybdis, where the young man somewhat disingenuously interprets Shakespeare as a wounded cuckold, creating characters through the filter of his, the bard's, memory, forming his women characters out of his own bias as requital. And before Ulysses ends, we readers are treated to another version of extreme verisimilitude. But art is not only imitation. Stripped of their original attachment to the world, Joyce's memories become his artistic palette. What is left to the artist is to arrange the recollections beautifully and insightfully. Joyce has Stephen the hero say, "The artist stands in the position of mediator between the world of experience and the world of his dreams, a mediator consequently gifted with twin faculties, a selective faculty and a reproductive faculty." Theodore Spencer explains in his introduction that the C symbol represents sections, lines, or words that Joyce drew a crayon through. To put that selective and reproductive faculty into context, it's nothing less than the artist's creative act, analogous to God's act that made us. The author selects the images that he or she wants to describe, crafts the plot or narrative, then strings these images together in an imitation of life, and amidst all these rhetorical manipulations, the artist attempts to bring some meaning or greater purpose to the work. Ulysses explores that selective and reproductive faculty. We see it in the hand of the artist arranging coincidences, chance encounters between characters, as well as an interesting string of textual errors that we will get to later. If that is the creative act, the response it looks for is the aesthetic effect. In general, an aesthetic effect is an intellectual and emotional reaction evoked from an audience by a performance, and typically an artist expects to awe an audience with beauty, which is to say, arrest one with wonder. Such an arrest comes in Joyce's epiphanies, moments when the artist puts images together and reaches a certain clarity in description. In Stephen Hero, explaining his epiphany concept to Cranley, Stephen argues that as the digestive systems are identical between a Chinaman, Greek, Coptic, or American Indian, so should be the mechanism of beauty's experience. Here Stephen says it of geographically distinct cultures. In The Oxen of the Sun, Joyce makes the same case across chronologically distinct generations. Joyce offers various descriptions of Mina Purefoy's creative act in a chronology of literary styles, each one once epitome, now passé. Still, no matter how you describe it, whatever style you clothe the images in, whether Latinate prose or Dickensian English, Mina's act has remained the same, stretching back to eternity. In the same way, Joyce argues, regardless of culture or era, art's beauty should be perceived the same way. Greeks like ouzo, I like beer. We both appreciate a good buzz. But if the mechanism of perceiving beauty doesn't change, why do styles? If Mina's creation doesn't change, why does the voice of the artist have to keep up with various fashions? Joyce tackles these issues apparently through Stephen's view of Aquinas. Stephen complains that he has only pushed to its logical conclusion the definition Aquinas has given of the beautiful. Well, let's take a closer look at that definition. Firstly, according to Reverend Frederick Copleston, based on his writings, Thomas had no formal aesthetic theory, and what Thomas does have to say on the matter is mostly borrowed from other writers. Nevertheless, Thomas did speak of beauty, and here's the statement that Stephen and Joyce in his Pola notebook focus on. As I've highlighted, it includes what Stephen calls Thomas's three things requisite for beauty: integrity, symmetry, and radiance. He describes integrity as almost its opposite, describes symmetry as analysis, and lastly, after long meditation, he tells Cranley it came to him what Thomas meant by the last property. Claritas is quidditas, which is to say, vividness or distinctness is whatness, when translated from Stephen's Latin. No, it's not. Thomas followed Aristotle, who in the Metaphysics held quidditas completely distinct from an object's appearance. In Stephen Hero, Joyce has Father Butts call Stephen out on this error, but neither Butts nor the chastisement make it into portrait. In this particular section of the Summa Theologica, Thomas is actually commenting on St. Hilary of Poitiers' description of the Trinity's consubstantiality. Thomas doesn't mean the remark to define beauty. This is just one more in a series of comments demonstrating that the only way to describe the Trinity is by likening the members to both truth and beauty, two of Aristotle's absolutes or perfections. We note, however, that in the same response to St. Hilary, Aquinas also states, "Hence we see that an image is said to be beautiful if it perfectly represents even an ugly thing." Oscar Wilde takes umbrage with that view, arguing in The Picture of Dorian Gray generally, and his essay The Decay of Lying in particular, if at its rhetorical heights art is a mirror of nature, it is perverse if it displays only beauty when held up to a corrupt soul. Art as a mirror of nature is also based on Aristotle and his imitation theory, as we recall. Shakespeare uses the same image when he has his young prince, Hamlet Jr., urge his players within a play to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature. What mirror does Joyce have to express his view of beauty? Compare Stephen's shaving mirror, a symbol of Irish art, the cracked looking-glass of a servant. The servant is the Irish artist. The cracked looking-glass is a unique culture expressed in a borrowed language, English, and under the constraints of an alien moral authority, Rome's Catholic Church. So whose mirror is it to be? In Ulysses universally, but in Aeolus particularly, Joyce argues that rhetoric of shallow intent is hollow, regardless of showy beauty and strong aesthetic effect. Hence, for art to be proper by this measure, it must somehow embrace both truth and beauty.